What if I told you that the most nutritionally complete food system ever developed on this continent wasn't created in a lab, wasn't sold in a store, and wasn't grown on a farm? It was foraged, prepared, and passed down by indigenous peoples for thousands of years, and most of it is still growing wild right now within walking distance of where you're sitting. Modern agriculture gives us about 30 crops. 30. That's what feeds the entire planet. But before colonization, Native American nations were using hundreds of wild plants, not just to eat, but to treat wounds, fight infections, and survive conditions that would overwhelm a modern emergency room. And the uncomfortable truth is this: science is only now catching up to what they already perfected. This is the full documentary breakdown. 20 indigenous superfoods. It's ranked by how powerfully they can restore what modern life has stripped away. Some of these you've never heard of. A few of them you've been walking past your entire life. And by the end, you'll understand why reclaiming this knowledge might be the most important thing you do for your own resilience. Before we start, let me tell you what's coming. Later in this list, we'll get to a single berry that indigenous warriors carried into battle, not as food, but as medicine. And modern research has found it contains one of the highest concentrations of a compound that pharmaceutical companies have spent billions trying to synthesize. When we reach the top 5, I'm going to show you a plant so central to survival that entire migration routes were planned around its harvest season. But the number 1 spot goes to something so fundamental, so deeply woven into the survival story of this continent, that calling it a superfood almost feels like an insult. It's closer to a complete survival system disguised as a single plant. Let's begin. Number 20. Bee balm. A wild aromatic herb used as a frontline antiseptic and respiratory aid across the Great Plains. The Ojibwe and Lakota used this plant as a poultice for skin infections and as a steam inhalation for congestion. It was brewed into tea so routinely during cold seasons that it became one of the first indigenous remedies adopted by European settlers. Here's why it worked. Bee balm contains high concentrations of thymol, the same active compound used in modern antiseptic mouthwashes. Its antimicrobial activity against bacteria and fungi is well documented. What indigenous healers figured out through centuries of observation, a chemistry lab confirmed in a fraction of the time. Use it as tea, steam inhalation, or topical poultice from fresh or dried leaves. Wild harvested bee balm tends to have higher thymol content than ornamental varieties. You want the leaves pungent when crushed. Number 19. Prickly pear cactus, a desert survival staple providing hydration, nutrition, and wound care from a single organism. For the Tohono O'odham, Pima, and Comanche peoples, both the pads and fruits were eaten fresh, dried, and stored. The mucilaginous inner flesh was applied directly to burns and wounds as a protective, cooling dressing. Modern research confirms it's rich in betalains and polysaccharides with antioxidant and anti-inflammatory properties. Preliminary studies suggest the fruit may support blood sugar regulation after meals. The younger pads are most nutrient-dense, and deeper fruit pigment means higher betalain content. Anyone on blood sugar medication should consult a provider before regular large quantity consumption. Number 18. Staghorn sumac. That bright red, fuzzy berry cluster you've probably seen along roadsides and never considered eating. Cherokee, Haudenosaunee, and Lenape nations cold steeped it into a citrus-flavored beverage called Indian lemonade, valued for its sharp taste and winter vitality support. Lab analysis confirms exceptionally high vitamin C, along with malic acid and tannins with mild antimicrobial properties. Cold steeping is key. Hot water degrades the vitamin C and turns it bitter. Crush, steep in cool water, strain through cloth. Critical distinction. Never confuse this with poison sumac, which has white berries and grows in wetlands. Staghorn sumac has red, upright clusters and grows in dry, open areas. Quick pause. If you're watching this and thinking, why didn't I learn any of this in school? Yeah, that's the whole reason this channel exists. If you want to keep going deeper into the knowledge that actually matters, subscribing is the way to make sure this keeps showing up. Alright, back to the list. Number 17. Cat tail, the supermarket of the swamp, used by virtually every indigenous nation wherever wetlands existed. Young shoots eaten raw or cooked. Pollen used as protein-rich flour. Rhizomes processed into starchy staple food. The seed fluff served as wound packing, insulation, and tinder, one plant doing the work of an entire supply chain. Nutritional analysis shows protein content comparable to corn pollen, with essential fatty acids, manganese, and potassium. Modern survival literature ranks cattail among the highest yield wild food sources per square metre. But cattails are bioaccumulators. They absorb contaminants from polluted water, never harvest from roadside ditches or agricultural runoff. Number 16. Wild bergamot or Oswego tea. Used by Cherokee and Haudenosaunee nations for digestive complaints, nausea, and post-illness recovery. After the Boston Tea Party, colonial Americans adopted this indigenous tea as a replacement for British imports, one of the clearest examples of indigenous knowledge entering settler culture without credit. Contains rosmarinic acid and flavonoids with antioxidant and mild antispasmodic activity, Kami supporting its traditional use as a gas and bloating reducer. Steep covered to preserve the volatile compounds. Before we go further, it's worth understanding something that makes every item on this list more powerful. Indigenous peoples made no separation between food and medicine. That distinction is modern. When a Lakota healer brewed bee balm, it wasn't alternative medicine. When a Tohono O'odham family ate prickly pear, it wasn't a nutrition strategy. Feeding the body and maintaining it were the same act. These aren't supplements, they're the original operating system. Number 15. Mesquite. A desert tree whose seed pods produce a protein-rich flour that sustained civilizations in landscapes where almost nothing else could grow. For the Pima, Tohono O'odham, and Cahuilla, mesquite was dietary bedrock. Pods were ground into sweet, nutty flour that stored for months. Entire seasonal calendars revolved around the harvest. Despite its sweetness, mesquite flour has a low glycemic index. Sugars bound in a high-fiber matrix that slows absorption. 11 to 17% protein, rich in calcium, magnesium, potassium, iron, and zinc. Harvest when pods are dry and rattling on the tree. Caution if you have legume allergies. Mesquite is in the legume family. Number 14. Yarrow. The most widely used wound care plant in indigenous North America. The Blackfoot, Zuni, Navajo, Miwok, Pawnee, nations across vastly different geographies, all arrived at the same conclusion. Yarrow stops bleeding. It contains acetylene, a compound that promotes platelet aggregation, the biochemical mechanism of clotting. We also chamazoline and flavonoids with anti-inflammatory and antimicrobial activity. Fresh leaves were crushed and packed into wounds. The fact that geographically unconnected nations converged on the same use is powerful evidence of independent empirical verification. Wild yarrow is stronger than garden varieties. Avoid during pregnancy. Number 13. Black walnut. A high-fat nut with a hull that functions as one of the continent's most potent natural antifungal agents. Cherokee and Comanche nations use the green hull topically for ringworm and fungal infections, and as a fish-stunning agent, which tells you everything about its potency. The active compound is juglone, which disrupts cellular respiration in target organisms. Hulls must be harvested green, juglone drops as they blacken. Hull preparations are for external use only, and they will permanently stain everything. Number 12. Chokecherry, the warrior's trail berry. This is what I mentioned at the beginning. Lakota, Blackfoot, Cree, and virtually all Plains nations considered it essential. The fruit most commonly pounded into pemmican, creating the most efficient field ration developed before modern food science. Modern analysis reveals extremely high anthocyanin concentrations, the compounds pharmaceutical companies have invested billions researching. Gram for gram, chokecherries rival or exceed blueberries. The bark contains prunicin with documented cough-suppressing properties. But here's the critical piece. Raw chokecherry seeds, leaves, and bark contain cyanogenic glycosides that release hydrogen cyanide. Traditional preparation, thorough drying, cooking, or crushing and drying within pemmican, neutralizes this completely. The indigenous method isn't a cultural preference, it's the safety mechanism. Properly prepared, safe and nutritious. Improperly prepared, dangerous. This plant proves that ancestral knowledge carries survival critical information. Number 11. Elderberry. You've seen the syrup in every health food store. What those bottles rarely mention is where the knowledge came from. Cherokee, Haudenosaunee, and Pacific Northwest nations used elderberry at the first signs of fever and respiratory illness for centuries before it became a supplement trend. It's one of the few traditional remedies with multiple randomized controlled trials. Studies suggest it may reduce cold and flu duration and severity. contains anthocyanins and lectins shown to interfere with viral replication. But raw elderberries are toxic and must be cooked. Red elderberry is traditionally avoided. Individuals with autoimmune conditions should consult a provider. Now, I need to address something you might be thinking, that these are just primitive alternatives to modern food. So let me give you one number. Wild food plants contain, on average, significantly higher concentrations of vitamins, minerals, and bioactive compounds than their domesticated counterparts. We didn't improve on these plants, we bred the resilience out of them. What indigenous peoples were eating was the full-strength version. What we eat is the diluted copy. Number 10, wild rose hips, used by virtually every northern nation, Cree, Blackfoot, Ojibwe, Nez Perce, as critical winter nutrition, collected after the first frost and dried for storage. These nations were preventing scurvy centuries before European medicine named the disease. Wild rose hips contain 10 to 50 times more vitamin C per gram than oranges. Also vitamins A, E, K, and carotenoids that may enhance vitamin C absorption. Harvest after frost. Air dry to preserve vitamin C. Wild species outperform cultivated roses. Number 9. Sunchoke. An indigenous cultivated tuber that feeds your gut microbiome more effectively than almost any prebiotic supplement. Haudenosaunee and Lenape nations grew sunchokes as a reliable starchy crop. Jamestown colonists survived on them, though that debt went unacknowledged. Sunchokes are the richest known whole food source of inulin, a prebiotic fiber that selectively feeds beneficial gut bacteria. Studies consistently show increases in beneficial populations, from being improved mineral absorption and better digestive function. Inulin is highest right after full harvest. Raw preparations maximize the prebiotic effect. Start small. The gas is real. Number 8. Wild plum. Osage, Omaha, and Pawnee nations harvested these in late summer and dried them for winter. Plum thickets were actively managed through burning and pruning, early agroforestry. Wild plums contain significantly higher phenolic compounds and vitamin C than commercial varieties. The tartness indicates higher phenolic content. Bark tea served as mouth and throat care. Dried wild plums are exceptional trail food. Don't eat the pits. Number 7. Bison berry, or silver buffalo berry. Blackfoot, Crow, Mandan, and Hidatsa peoples harvested these after the first hard frost, beating branches over blankets. The berries were whipped into a foamy confection called Indian ice cream. Here's the revelation. Buffalo berries contain extremely high lycopene levels, comparable to or exceeding tomatoes, a wild prairie berry quietly rivaling the lycopene poster child of the modern diet. The post-frost harvest timing is biochemical optimization encoded as tradition. Frost transforms flavor and increases sugar content. One quick thing. A video like this doesn't reach people through the algorithm by default. It reaches people because someone watching decides it should. If you think this knowledge needs a bigger audience, a like is literally how that happens. Let's keep going. Number 6. White sage. Sacred to the Chumash, Cahuilla, and many southwestern peoples for thousands of years of smudging ceremonies. Also used as tea for colds and topical wash for wounds. A study in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology found that medicinal smoke, including sage, reduced airborne bacteria by over 94%, with suppression lasting up to 24 hours. Essential oil analysis confirms high eucalyptal and camphor concentrations. Critical note: wild white sage is over-harvested. Purchase only from indigenous growers or ethical cultivators, and approach smudging with cultural respect. The final 5 items aren't just foods. Everyone was considered sacred by at least one nation, not symbolically but practically. Sacred because survival depended on them. Number 5. Acorns, the single most calorie-productive wild food source in North America, for California nations, Miwok, Pomo, Ohlone, Yurok. Acorn processing was among the most sophisticated food technologies on the continent. Oak woodlands were managed through controlled burning at landscape scale for millennia. This wasn't foraging. This was agriculture. Leached acorn flour is rich in complex carbohydrates, oleic acid, and moderate protein. Ecological studies confirm managed oak woodlands produced more calories per acre than early European wheat farming. The tannin leaching step is non-negotiable. It transforms a bitter nut into sweet storable flour. Korean and Japanese cuisines still use acorn starch today. Number 4. Pinyon pine nuts. the plant so important that migration and settlement patterns were organized around its harvest. For Shoshone, Paiute, Washoe, and Ute peoples, the pinyon harvest was the year's defining event, determining winter camp locations. See, crop failure was a survival crisis. 14% protein, 68% healthy fats, rich in magnesium, zinc, iron, and B vitamins. The unique compound penylenic acid may trigger cholecystokinin release, a satiety hormone, meaning pine nuts may regulate appetite through a specific biochemical pathway. Wild pinyon nuts have a richer profile than commercial Mediterranean and Asian species. Store cold, roast in the shell. Number 3. Wild rice, the only cereal grain native to North America. Menumin, the good berry, is sacred to the Ojibwe. Their migration narratives describe being guided to the place where food grows on water. This grain is central to Ojibwe identity, spirituality, and sovereignty. True wild rice contains more protein than any unfortified whole grain, 14 to 15 grams per cooked cup, and be high in B vitamins, magnesium, zinc, with unusually complete amino acids. Essential distinction. Hand-harvested wild rice from natural waters is a fundamentally different product from cultivated paddy rice sold as wild rice. Higher nutrients, nuttier flavour, chewier texture. It's available from Ojibwe producers, and supporting them is the most direct way to honour where this knowledge comes from. Number 2. Chaga. A birch tree fungus that looks like burnt charcoal and contains one of the highest antioxidant concentrations ever measured in a natural substance. Cree, Ojibwe, and Dene peoples slow-simmered it into dark, earthy tea consumed daily and during illness. Rich in betulinic acid, beta-glucans that modulate, not stimulate, not suppress, but modulate, immune function, melanin, and triterpenes. The compound diversity is unusual. It works as a matrix of interacting compounds. Wild harvested from living birch is the only validated form. Lab-grown mycelium on grain doesn't match. High in oxalates, a concern for kidney stone history. May thin blood mildly. Immune-modulating properties warrant caution with immunosuppressants. Number 1. Not a single plant. The three sisters, corn, beans, and squash. The most nutritionally complete, ecologically sustainable food technology ever developed on this continent. The Haudenosaunee polyculture is almost impossibly elegant. Corn provides structure for beans to climb. Beans fix nitrogen into the soil, fertilizing the corn and squash. Squash shades the ground, retaining moisture and suppressing weeds. 3 plants, each solving a problem the others create. The genius extends to nutrition. Corn provides carbohydrates. Beans provide protein and the amino acid lysine that corn lacks. Squash seeds provide fats, vitamins A and C, and minerals. Together, complete amino acids comparable to animal protein. Now a textbook example of protein complementation. Agricultural research confirms Three Sisters polyculture produces more total calories and nutrients per acre than any of the 3 grown alone, while improving soil fertility, reducing water loss, and suppressing pests. Benefits industrial agriculture achieves only through synthetic inputs. In Haudenosaunee tradition, corn, beans, and squash are personified as inseparable sisters, reflecting the understanding that their power comes from relationship, not from any one plant alone. The most advanced food system on this continent wasn't a single engineered crop. It was a designed relationship, refined over generations by people who understood that nutrition, ecology, and sustainability are the same problem. Here's what all 20 of these have in common. Not one was engineered, patented, or optimized in a laboratory. Every single one was understood, completely, precisely, over thousands of years, by people who couldn't afford to be wrong. Because for them, food wasn't a lifestyle choice. It was the difference between survival and extinction. And what modern science keeps confirming is that they weren't just right, they were ahead. The most radical thing you can do for your own resilience isn't to buy the next supplement or follow the next diet trend. It's to look down, look at what's already growing, and remember that someone a very long time ago already figured this out. If you do one thing after watching this, walk outside within the next 48 hours and identify one plant from this list growing in your area. You don't have to pick it or eat it. Just find it, recognize it. Because the first step to reclaiming this knowledge isn't buying something, it's seeing what's already there. Last thing, drop a comment. Which one of these 20 plants is already growing where you live? I think a lot of people are going to be surprised by how many of these are closer than they realized. Let me know.